Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I'll be providing my book review of the book Quest for the Hidden City by George Mann, the first middle grade book in the second phase of the High Republic. I have overall been enjoying the High Republic. Through phase one, I thought that for the most part, the adult novels were amazing. I thought that the middle grade novels were very entertaining. Some were great, some were okay, some were good. And then I thought that the young adult novels were overall letdowns. So I had, mixed feelings overall, but as a whole, I enjoyed phase one of the High Republic. And so when phase two came, I was curious to see how I would feel about it. And while there are certainly things I don't like in this book, Path of Deceit was the first YA novel that I really, really enjoyed in the High Republic. So it started phase two with a pretty good start. And I was curious to see how this book would do. I did not get into reading middle grade until the High Republic came around, really. So I haven't gotten to read George Mann's Myths and Fables or his Dark Legends or the Life Day Treasury. I just haven't gotten to read... I haven't been able to read those yet. But this is the first I've read of his, and if it's a good indication, I think I'm going to really like George Mann's style. This is the longest book of middle grade that we've gotten thus far, that I could tell. It's about 290 pages, and it's by far the most complex of the middle grade stories. There's roughly about 3 or 4 different plot lines happening. They're all interconnected, but there's 3 or 4 point of view plot lines that you're following, whereas most of the other middle grade books from the High Republic have about 2 plot lines. So this is definitely more complicated. And this is very exciting because this, like Mission to Disaster, is a mystery. And this is my favorite middle grade book, Mission to Disaster, because of the mystery and because of the execution. Everything was executed well in this book. I feel like this book executed just about everything well. There's just one thing it faltered on. So when it comes to plot, as I said, this is a mystery. Some Jedi have gone missing on this planet or planets, and you don't know where they are or why they went missing. And so these other Jedi, these other Pathfinders, are sent to go after them. And they find out the Jedi were helping out this this race of aliens. And now they need to have 2 jobs, not only to save the Jedi who were lost, but also to try to help out this alien race. And so they basically have 2 priorities, and they're trying to do both of them. And it's a really sweet book. It's really an adventure book with a mystery twist. And it's, of course, set in Star Wars. And there's Jedi characters, there's pilots, there's droids, there's aliens, there's new alien species, new planets. There are a few veiled references to Path of Deceit and to the High Republic as a whole, but you absolutely do not need to have read anything else. If you just want to jump in and read a High Republic story, that just read a book, this is a pretty easy jump-in point. And if you are in this age group of the I'd say like the 10 to 13, maybe 10 to 14 age range, upper elementary or middle school, I think that this would be a very entertaining book for you to read. I think that it is a fairly quick read, but it does everything for the intended audience. I say that a good book does everything for its intended audience, especially if it's a kid's book, and then a great kid's book is good for the intended audience and older audiences. I certainly enjoyed the process of reading this book, but I don't think that most adult audiences will grab onto it, which is why I say it's a good book, but it isn't necessarily among the greats. But I still think this is a very entertaining Star Wars story, and if I'm recommending Star Wars stories for younger readers, this is certainly one I could point to. One of the things this book does is it has lots of themes that it's dealing with. One of the most preeminent themes that it deals with is environmentalism, and no matter where you stand on current environmentalism, the themes in here I think are handled pretty well, albeit pretty heavy-handed. There's also some themes about greed and about letting greed take over you and what happens as a result. And I think that those themes were handled well. And then there's also themes about giving up hope. There is a father and son character who are stranded on one of these planets, and they have no hope really that they know of, and yet they still are trying to cling on to hope. And the way that they explore, should they give up hope? Should they keep the hope? Like, should they transfer it to, they're not hoping in a person, but rather in themselves, that they'll pull themselves up by the bootstraps and save themselves? You don't know. And it's a great mystery, and it's a great exploration of the themes about hope. So this book tackles themes really well, especially for kids. If you're an adult, it's too heavy-handed for you. And then the last thing I'll say is there is one particular negative, I would say, is that this book does not have standout characters. When you're writing books in the High Republic, there's huge casts, there's characters all over the place, and they're interweaving, and you have to make your characters stand out. And one of the things that made A Test of Courage and Mission to Disaster such great stories is the characters really stand out. Vernestra Rowe and Imri Kentaros stand out to me as characters. Maybe it's partially because I've seen them in so much, but also because they were very well established in A Test of Courage. But then you have a book like Race to Crash Point Tower, where the main characters are, to me, largely forgettable, and the main characters are not particularly, they don't have too much that makes them stand out to me. And so that's why I think that this is not a particularly good book, among other reasons. Race to Crash Point Tower had many flaws with it. This book, while it deals with the plot and the themes really well, and the world building is superb here. Some of the best world building of any middle grade book. The problem with it is the characters just don't stand out. They're pretty bland, they're pretty one-dimensional, and they're not going to, except for one character who is a twist character. There is one character who is part of the mystery. But other than that, the rest of the characters are pretty one-dimensional, and it's just sad that the characters don't connect with you well. And maybe what I've wanted them to do is to have all of the middle grade characters stay in all the middle grade novels, connect through. And I don't know if they will. If they do stick through it, I think it's the potential that they could grow on the audience. But if they keep just changing them around, moving them to other mediums, giving them cameos everywhere, these characters will largely be forgotten by the general reading audience. So overall, I really enjoyed this book. It is really entertaining, really well written when it comes to plot, themes, and world building. It's just missing some character work that it needed, and it doesn't appeal to broad audiences like adults. It really is more designed for kids. So I give this book an 8 out of 10. For comparison's sake, I also gave Path of Deceit an 8 out of 10. Even though I gave these books the same rating, it's a different type of, an 8 out of 10 for a YA novel is different from an 8 out of 10 for a middle grade. 8 out of 10 for a middle grade is pretty good. 8 out of 10 for YA for me is very good, because I don't give out 8 out of 10s for YA often. But still, I think that this is a very well done book. If I had to compare it to the middle grades that have come out thus far, I think the weakest middle grade is obviously Race to Crash Point Tower. I think that that's just not a good book in retrospect. I think I gave it a decently favorable rating at the time, but in hindsight, I should not. Then you have the next book on the list I would put is A Test of Courage. I actually rated this book lower when I first read it, and it's actually grown on me for a couple of reasons. One is I actually liked the story the more I thought about it, and then also I think that this book works because this book works. It's really, this book is a sequel to this one, and this one sets things up that pay off here. So I liked it better having read this. So this book I would also give about an 8 out of 10. This book has some major issues that I also give it. And so this book is also about an 8 out of 10. And then I think that the Mission to Disaster is for a middle grade book, it's going to be hard for the High Republic to top this. it's going to be really hard. Now, nothing, of course, will compare to like the old Kevin J. Anderson, Rebecca Mesta, like lightsabers, or the Lost Ones, or some of the others that they wrote, or even some of the Jedi Apprentice. It's going to be very hard to top those, but I think this is the best High Republic middle grade we've gotten. But this one, I can still give it a favorable rating and still say, especially if you have a little Jedi a little Padawan in your house, maybe buy this for them to read it, and then you can flip through it and read it afterwards or beforehand, and you can discuss it with them and have a little bit of fun. So I give this an 8 out of 10. If you've read this book, let me know your ranking down below, your rating of it. How does it compare to the other middle grade for you? And do you like the trend of them going longer with it? I certainly do. I hope they continue to go longer because that means we get more story, more bang for our buck. So until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.